RWXBL.
Yeah, which usually means they didn't take shipping for it.
Yeah.
You know, it just like came with something else.
I bought a Hasselblad lens from a guy for $500, which is a great deal for a Hasselblad wide-angle lens. It's so expensive.
They're $4,000 usually, right?
Yeah, but he left the thrift store sticker on it. I know he paid $15 for this lens.
Yeah,
yeah.
Like,
I'll give you 50, and you're still making tons of profit.
Oh, how's it going? Hello, what's up?
So you do that before?
How's it going for you guys today?
No, like that's what he wants.
Nice. Yeah, busy day for sure. Busy day. But
Right.
yeah, all big chillin'.
Nice.
Hello.
Hey,
How's
how
it
are
going?
you?
Chillin'.
Good.
Moving, vibing with it. You know what I mean? Let's see. Looks like that's all good here. Flags are good in your shot. Pool cam. Cool. Heck yeah, brother.
I'm gonna go back and get my boss now to get over here.
Got you. Sounds good.
How have you been though?
It's been good. Not bad. Hello.
Yes, I was just telling you around the back. Okay. Yes. I wasn't sure. Hey, how are you?
Which I guess is better than the other way. Yeah.
Yeah, I will do a coffee and pastry after this one.
Coffee and pastry.
Yeah, I think that's gonna be lunch's coffee and pastry.
Yeah. I went to Oban Pond yesterday.
Yeah. Had some of the cereal water that they claim is coffee.
Yeah. Basically.
I mean, the Canyon coffee cart is good for espresso drinks, but they don't really do it for espresso. I'm yet to find a really good drip coffee. Honestly, I think the best option is coffee.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I've never even gone to that Dunkin' over Longwood. Do they have donuts in there too?
Oh yeah, that's a Dunkin'.
It is.
Yeah. They do breakfast sandwiches, the donuts. I find Dunkin' breakfast crazy.
Yeah, well, I don't usually eat breakfast sandwiches.
I'll do the McMuffin. It is like widely accepted as not terrible for you. Especially if you don't eat the muffin part of McMuffin. But I always eat muffin part of McMuffin.
Yeah.
You offhandedly said all that jazz, and now Chicago is stuck in my head, and I blame you entirely for it.
I get it a lot, unfortunately. Everything good for you?
Yeah,
All that?
solid.
Heck yeah. Good. Love to see it.
He's got a great Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
What's his name?
And I didn't even look for him on Instagram. He popped up on mine.
beautiful braids.
Well,
Okay. Okay. It's been like 6 months or has it been? I haven't seen you in
I know.
No, it looks your hair looks beautiful. I just didn't
You
see.
didn't notice.
I didn't know.
You didn't see. I guess you haven't. You just
Hanging? Anyways, for the summertime, I guess it's better, right? Not that long here.
Yeah, I was shocked when I learned that they are less maintenance. Yeah. That was fun. Doesn't have an extra shot. I want to see the buttons. She is done like super short. Yeah, apparently it's broken. So she doesn't want to have it. And tracking her to where she should go. So she was just up weekend at my cousin's wedding. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
That's a. That's
the
where.
venue is just the time for you to see the contract. This is just a contract. That you might just want super common subjects. This is what they're doing. I guess they'll change stuff. It's your boss. It's good. She's excited. So where's that boss? Just here on stand.
Just do my rounds. You guys are all good back there?
Estimate?
5 minutes, give or take, if I assume. They're waiting on a few more members, but
Okay.
probably within 5.
Okay. Same subject matter.
Gracious, this is pretty great.
2-minute heads up. So 2 minutes, and then it should start. Heads up.
Good morning, and thank you all for joining us. I'm Congresswoman Yvette D. Clarke, Chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and proud representative of New York's 9th Congressional District, that's Central and Southwest Brooklyn. I want to thank my Tri-Caucus colleagues, CHC Chair Adriano Espaillat and CAPAC Chair Grace Meng, for their leadership and presence here today. We are gathered here today because, like so many Americans, we are outraged by what we are witnessing in the streets of Los Angeles and in communities across our nation. President Trump's unlawful decision to deploy the National Guard onto the streets of Los Angeles is a reckless and inflammatory escalation, one designed not to restore calm, but to provoke chaos. Let's be clear about how this began. With peaceful protests, peaceful protests sparked by the unlawful and inhumane targeting, detention, and deportation of our immigrant neighbors. And David Huerta, a California union president arrested and injured during an immigration and customs enforcement raid last week perpetrated by the Trump administration. The Los Angeles Police Department have largely stabilized the situation, but instead of de-escalating, President Trump seized control of the National Guard forces in defiance of constitutional norms and poured gasoline on an already volatile moment. Now, under the false guise of restoring order to a crisis of his own making, the president has deployed hundreds of active duty Marines to engage in domestic law enforcement, something they do not have the legal authority to do. Don't fall for the lie. This is not about protecting public safety. It's about stoking fear and silencing peaceful dissent. It's about turning us one against one another. This is a direct attack on civil rights, due process, and our democratic norms, targeting black and communities of color. Perhaps the most sobering truth is this. For Donald Trump, Los Angeles is only the beginning. If this president is willing to send military troops into an American city over peaceful dissent, we must ask, what happens next? What American community will be next? In a matter of weeks, maybe days, another contrived crisis could bring the armed forces to more of our communities. This presence won't be to defend our freedoms, but to instill fear. That has always been his goal, to make every black, Latino, Asian, and immigrant community, or any American who would dare to speak out against him, afraid. From threatening to arrest a sitting governor to hinting at martial force against civilians, Trump is not acting like a leader. He is posturing as a strong man, desperate, dangerous, and utterly detached from the principles of democracy. This president has crossed the line, and we must all understand what that means. We still don't know the full consequences of this unprecedented authoritarian overreach. But let me be clear. Congressional Democrats stand in full solidarity with the residents of Los Angeles, with our immigrant sisters and brothers, and with the peaceful protesters who dare to speak out and who will support every effort to oppose this president's abuse of power. And I want to thank Governor Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass for their resolve and leadership. To those who choose to peacefully protest, stay strong and remain peaceful. Rise above his chaos. The right to protest, to speak out against injustice, is fundamental to our democracy. It is protected by our Constitution. It is part of the American story. Trump wants violence, not to stop it, but to justify his own. Do not give him what he wants. Having said that, it's my honor now to turn the podium over to the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, Congressman Adriano Espaillat.
Thank you, Chair Clark, Chair Meng. Together we make up the Tri-Caucus, a strong voice in the House of Representatives, that represents many districts that are being impacted by this aggressive action from the White House. So let's turn back and figure out how we got here. President Trump says that he's going to arrest violent criminals and deport them. The fact is, he's going after working people. He's going after moms. He's going after folks that are trying to make ends meet. He's going into a Home Depot to arrest day laborers. He's stopping families on their way to a Houston hospital where 4 children, U.S.-born children, were deported to Mexico with their parents, including a 10-year-old little girl with a cancerous brain tumor that now has no access to the health care that she needs to save her life. That's who he's going after. And he's doing this in an aggressive way. And so that's what got us to this moment where hundreds of people showed up to an ICE facility to protest because they've heard, they got accounts that over 200 people, just like the ones that I described, were being held there. 4 of our members went there and were not allowed in. In fact, chemicals were spilled on the floor. We're asking for a full investigation of that action. And some of them suffering from asthma were impacted by that. I myself was at 26 Federal Plaza on Sunday as people were called in for court dates on a Sunday. Were dismissed, their cases were dismissed, only to find out that ICE was waiting for them outside in the hallways where they were cuffed, kept in the building, processed for hours upon hours, to be sent to a detention center where they await deportation. People that are trying to comply with the law, with the parameters that have been set for them, the regulations that have been told for them to follow, are being trapped in the courtrooms, in ICE offices, as they try to comply with the rules and regulation. That is the state of America today. And that's why people took to the street to protest. And that's why members of Congress went to these ICE facilities to comply with our duties of oversight granted to us by the U.S. Constitution. And we were summarily denied entry. We will be going back. And we will continue to go back until we have access to those facilities and we determine exactly what's going on there, because people are coming in and they're not coming out. So that is what's happening right now in America. He has militarized Los Angeles. He has deputized local law enforcement with federal powers, dividing people as opposed to bringing the country together. The Tri-Caucus will stand united. We will stand united. We will comply with our constitutional duties of oversight, and we will continue to visit these ICE facilities until we get to the bottom of this. Thank you, and I yield to Congresswoman Grace Meng.
Hi, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Grace Meng, chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, or CAPAC. I'm proud to join my Tri-Caucus colleagues here today, Chairs Yvette Clarke and Adriano Espaillat, to stand up for immigrants and stand against this Trump administration's attacks on our neighbors, our loved ones, and our friends. Like millions of Americans across the country, I'm deeply concerned by the administration's use of aggressive tactics against our immigrant communities. Armed agents have raided schools, workplaces, and homes, terrorizing our neighbors and literally ripping families apart. These stories are heartbreaking. You've heard some of them. A 4-year-old citizen, U.S. citizen, who was receiving treatment for stage 4 cancer was deported after showing up for a routine check-in. And child's birthday party in Texas was raided by federal authorities with flashbang grenades. As a mom, I can't even imagine how traumatizing that must have been for these kids. These are not the criminals the administration claims they are. They are our neighbors, our friends, and loved ones who work hard, pay their taxes, and contribute to our country. The Department of Homeland Security should use its limited resources to address serious national security threats and fix our broken immigration system. Instead, President Trump continues to escalate tensions and even deployed 2,000 plus National Guard troops and 700 Marines to Los Angeles, despite the sitting California governor's objections. This is not about public safety. This is about exerting control and striking more fear in our immigrant communities. Threatening to send troops into neighborhoods, especially against the state governor's wishes, is an abuse of power that will undermine the National Guard's mission, erode trust, and put more people in harm's way. This military action is coming from the same president who refused to deploy the National Guard on January 6th, when there was more violent protests already happening right here. My colleagues and I were trapped in the Capitol while brave law enforcement officers here put their lives on the line to protect us from violent insurrectionists. And I remember getting the message very soon that no, the president will not be sending the National Guard. Let me be clear, Americans have a constitutional right to protest peacefully and to demand justice and due process for their neighbors, especially when the federal government fails to uphold these principles. As members of Congress, we have been exercising our legal authority to conduct oversight of detention centers and demand accountability from the administration. We stand in solidarity with the immigrants who make America great, and our country is made stronger because of them. And we will continue to fight for immigration policies that reflect our nation's values of fairness and dignity for all, not cruelty disguised as law and order. Thank you, and I yield back to Chair Clark.
Let me thank all of my colleagues assembled here. This is a representation of our Democratic caucus to a large extent, because indeed, we are a reflection of the constituencies that sent us here to represent them. Having said that, we're open now for any questions you may have. Yes, could you state your name and your publication or outlet?
Yes, my name is Annie Shea, and I'm with the Daily Caller News Foundation. We've heard some Democrats say today that they condemn any violence that broke out in LA over the weekend. However, Congresswoman Maxine Waters has said that there's been no violence. She didn't see any violence. There wasn't anything happening in LA. And there's just a bit of a difference in messaging there from what we're hearing from a lot of other Democrats. Is that concerning at all, that difference in messaging or anything of that nature?
I think everyone is entitled to their opinion. She's there on the ground and she has her own observations. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm Lucy Cox with Fox News. So President Trump and the DOD have sent 700 Marines to LA, but they're needing additional training for domestic situations. So what do you think this says about the decision to send Marines there?
Well, I think it's a waste of taxpayer dollars. The governor of the state of California has not requested this, and it's being imposed on his state. Yes.
Nick with Politico. I wanted to ask about a post on X last night by Senator Fetterman of Pennsylvania. He said that your party loses the moral high ground when you refuse to condemn setting cause of fire, destroying buildings, and insulting law enforcement. I was wondering if I could get your response to that. Is this helpful for him to be criticizing others in the party?
He has a First Amendment right to say whatever he'd like to say. Next. Mm-hmm.
Carrie Pickett with the Washington Times. Now, it's been reported that 14 law enforcement officers so far have been injured in L.A. rioting, and there have been reports of millions of dollars in property damage. Do you believe, given these statistics, that these protests are peaceful and that they do not constitute an insurrection?
I don't believe there's an insurrection taking place. Okay. And I'd like to see the statistics around those who are ill and sickly who are currently being detained.
Okay, one other question. Leader Jeffries recently said that every single ICE agent who's engaged in this aggressive overreach and are trying to hide their identities from the American people will be unsuccessful in doing that, and every single one of them, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, will of course be identified. Do you think that ICE agents should be identified and to the public, and why the Democrat position that criminals should remain masked and law enforcement should be unmasked?
Anyone that's enforcing the law or is an agent for peace or the law should not be anonymous. Why should they be anonymous?
What about those protesting, though?
I don't believe that anybody should be anonymous, but precisely someone that is enforcing the law, that comes into your house, knocks on your door, should not be anonymous. Their name should be branded in their uniform, and we should be able to identify their face. Absolutely.
And just to add to that, how do we know who these individuals are? Any Joe Schmo on the street can now claim to be an ICE agent and harm someone in our communities. That cannot stand. That could not stand. You would not want someone random to come up and accost you, and you have no way of indicating who they are, where they're taking you, what their mission is. These individuals must comply with making sure that they're known. I'm talking about law enforcement. We're talking about law enforcement. Protesters and law enforcement are not on the same level. So to try to equate the two is a false equation. Next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Jones, Once Upon a Hill. Democrats joined Republicans last night on a resolution to condemn the terrorist attack in Boulder last week. It shows that bipartisanship, that Democrats are willing to stand with Republicans on issues of democracy, issues of fighting anti-Semitism. Are you disappointed that so few Republicans have come out and joined you all in pushing back against the Trump administration and what you all describe as lawless? And what do those conversations look like with your colleagues behind the scenes across the aisle? Are you hopeful that some will join you all in condemning the Trump administration, this lawlessness that you claim is going on?
I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised.
I can say that there are Republicans who are weaponizing tools to fight anti-Semitism. Republicans say they stand against anti-Semitism, and at the same time, they're trying to decimate funding to agencies like the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, which is our main agency to fight back against anti-Semitism on campuses, for example.
Yes?
Mexican President
Your name and outlet?
Epic Times.
Okay.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has described some of the protesters as heroes. Does that raise any concerns in terms of national sovereignty or political interference from abroad?
You know, everyone has their observations. You know, we don't live in isolation, and people are watching what's taking place around the world here in the United States. Like we have here our First Amendment right to speak out, she has hers. Mm-hmm.
The Mexican president is entitled to her opinion. Mm-hmm. Our president wants to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. How about that? Mm-hmm. Is that hemispheric interference? He has opinions about practically every country in the world. Not all the time the best opinions. He's called countries names that I will not pronounce in this audience. So he has his own opinion. She's entitled to hers. No. Vladimir Putin, penetrated social media. He orchestrated actions that many could characterize as election fraud. He was actively involved in swaying the American public in support of one candidate against the other. I don't think that's what the Mexican president is doing.
Say your name.
Congressmember Nanette Berrigan, California's 44th District. The Mexican president, when she made these comments, was referring to people that were protesting peacefully against mass deportations. And of course, in Los Angeles, we have a large Mexican population. So I stand with the people in Los Angeles who are protesting peacefully against these mass deportations and against the process, which is ICE treating people without any dignity and inhumanely. So I believe the context in which she said it was about standing with protesters and making sure people are treated with dignity. So let's not confuse that with Vladimir Putin and him interfering with an election that has nothing to do with Russian Americans.
I see you. Yes.
You've described what Trump is doing in Los Angeles as lawlessness and unconstitutional and a violation of human rights. Do these things rise to the level of impeachment? Are these impeachable offenses?
Well, I believe it is. I definitely believe it is. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Yes?
Yes, Garden from AP. I'm hoping you can just take a step back and characterize the nature of the protest. I think you're getting a lot of questions about instances of violence, whether you characterize them as peaceful. Can you just kind of describe for us, how you see these protests? Are they mostly peaceful? Instances violent? Are they violent protests?
You have heard all of us say and ask protesters to be peaceful. When the protests right here at the United States Capitol were happening, when there was more violence than we had ever seen on the first and second day of the protests in LA, this exact president, when we were begging him to send in the National Guard, when there was already violence and vandalism right here, he refused to do so. So now he's going to turn the argument around and say it's about public safety? You can't be a hypocrite like that.
This is not a mob chanting, Jews will not replace us in Virginia. This is not a violent mob chanting, hang Mike Pence, where's Nancy, in the Capitol. For the most part, the protesters are peace-abiding people that are concerned about the aggressiveness of ICE and human rights and the treatment of immigrants across the country. I don't know of any immigrant that leaves his or her house in the morning and says, wait a minute, let me see how I break the law today, get arrested, and deported. Quite the contrary. They probably leave their houses and say, I'm going to abide with the law. I don't want to be stopped. I don't want to be arrested and deported. So the people that are protesting, for the most part, they're not violent. They're not there to cause issues of trouble or vandalism. The ones that are there causing that, we're rejecting that forcefully, and we're saying to people, protest peacefully. But certainly, this is not to the standard of a mob chanting, Jews will not replace us, or hang Mike Pence.
Yes.
I'm Julio Chavez with Reuters. Seeing what the response has been in California, what are your thoughts on how counter-protesters may be received here in D.C. On the weekend for the birthday parade?
Well, as long as they're peaceful, they have a right. No more questions? Yes, sir. And what is your name again?
Yeah, Jacob Adams, Daily Signal. Immigration was a top issue during the 2024 election, which President Trump won, including the popular vote. Do you worry that the American people want, border enforcement and are not with you on this issue?
Well, first of all, the border has the lowest crossings in over the past 10 years right now. So it's not about border crossings. What we're talking about are core constitutional values, due process. And this president has violated that. And so, notwithstanding winning an election, I don't believe that any person of goodwill would see what is taking place across this nation and not be concerned about the way that this is being conducted, the violation of human rights, the lack of due process. And we're beginning to see a shift in people who thought one thing about how Donald Trump was going to conduct his immigration policy, which was to go after violent criminals, and are now seeing their neighbors, their congregants, people they work with, being harassed, being disappeared, and being treated as subhuman. All right, we're good. Enjoy the rest of the day, folks.